What's going on, guys? I'm Nick the Tutor, and I've helped thousands of students prepare for tests like the digital SAT. And in today's video, we're going to be going over my personal predictions for the May SAT, what to expect, what's going to be on the exam. So let's get right into it. So number one, let's talk about what happened before the May SAT. So we had the March SAT. Many students across the country felt that it was very challenging and very difficult. So I'm going to go into a little bit about that first. So why did so many students find the March test difficult? And what can we learn from that? How can we use that information to prepare better for the May SAT? Well, the number one reason that students found the March SAT to be difficult was mostly the math, but really it had to do with the lack of quality practice materials. The 4 College Board tests and the PSAT were very inadequate for preparing students for the digital test. My prediction number one for the May SAT is more of the same. The May SAT is going to be equally as challenging as the March SAT, and we have to use the right materials to prepare. So in order to combat that, just the general challenging nature of the test, you're going to want to complete College Board Test 5 and College Board Test 6 in Blue Book. Those tests are much better. They're a much better indication of what the real test will be like. My prediction is that students who use those tests will have a much easier time on the May test because they will be ready for the challenge. Now let's get into prediction number two. Prediction number two is that students who prepare by doing full-time practice tests will perform better on the exam than students that don't. That was one of the big factors, I think, for the March SAT. First time they gave the test, I understand a lot of students didn't have time or didn't realize the importance of completing full-time practice tests. So I highly recommend that you do that. I think that the test preparedness was not there for a lot of students. Now look, a lot of students did well. I had many students that performed extremely well on the test, but some felt they were not prepared for the actual day of the test, and that's because they didn't engage in the practice testing. So instead of doing the linear version of test 5 and 6, or even if you did the linear version, I highly recommend that you sit down the Blue Book app, pull up the Desmos calculator, and really grind through the test in the timed fashion. Don't pause the test, don't stop and come back to it. Take it like a real test so you can prepare yourself for test day. I think another thing that really affected students was the fact that since they were unprepared for the difficult nature of the second module of the math, especially more so on the early questions where you had a few tricky ones early on, I think students got very thrown off. And I think the students that prepare themselves for the test by saying, look, I know I'm not going to know every single question, or hopefully I do, but if I don't, I need to know how to manage through it. I need to make sure to put something down and move on and continue to complete the test and not worry about 1 or 2 questions that are troubling me. I think those students are going to do a lot better on the May test. I think use the March test as a way to learn from that experience, and then that will enable you to do much better on May. So make sure to do those tests. That's definitely important. My second prediction also relates to math, and my prediction is that Desmos, although it will be the most useful calculator that you can use on the test, not every question relating to a graph will be solvable by Desmos. I think they know that this is a bit of an issue. Knowing how to use Desmos in an advanced fashion is a huge advantage on the digital SAT. Let's keep that 100% clear, guys. You need to know how to use Desmos. All of the functions, all of the graph problems can really be done pretty easily in Desmos, as I'm sure many videos on YouTube have shown you. But what you need to understand is they're going to design a few questions where you cannot use Desmos, even though you may think you can, or it may help to some degree, but it won't give you the exact answer. Just expect that going into the test. If you're totally reliant on the Desmos calculator for the exam, you'll definitely do pretty well because it is very powerful. But at the same time, I really want you guys to understand the background mathematics that go into a lot of these problems. It's great to be able to do every linear equation in Desmos, but if they throw something in there where it just doesn't work, you still have to be able to get that. So I would encourage all of you to study the core math concepts for lines and parabolas, and make sure you're not solely relying on Desmos. You do want to understand the underpinnings of math. So prediction number 2 is that there will be some questions where you cannot use Desmos, even though you think you might be able to, and you need to be able to do those to proceed with the test. So definitely keep that in mind. Prediction number 3 relates to the English part of the test. I think what we saw in the first digital SAT was that there was a huge emphasis on extremely technical grammar questions. I think that that's going to continue. I think that's a good thing to include on the test. If you go back to the old SAT, we had 44 questions in the writing section where there was grammar questions that were extremely technical. Obviously, with a fewer number of questions now, on that part of the test and that question type, they're going to really hit hard on those topics that students really struggle with. So make sure to study those. I think that was a part of the test, especially on tests 1, 2, and 3, where the questions were just really easy and students were able to just feel through them, use intuition, just kind of use how things sound, and you were able to get a lot of them correct. And I think when the real test came, it ended up being a little bit more of a technical version than students expected. So make sure to study all of your grammar rules and principles, do the practice problems, make sure you understand them. I noticed some popular topics. Dangling modifiers is one of them. They really have been using that often on the exams. Also, things like however or other transition words used in the middle of a sentence, that has come up a lot. Remember the double commas. And then some other things, obviously punctuation being hugely important. Creatively using punctuation, like using semicolons to separate list items because you have a list within a list. That's another one that really almost never came up on the paper test and has now come up several times on the practice exams for the digital test. So make sure to look out for those. I predict that at least a few of those will be on the May test because it's just been so prevalent on the practice exams. They're probably telling us something there, so make sure to know those concepts. Prediction number 4 is that in the English portion of the test, I think on the main point, strength and weaken questions, are going to be a lot of confusing long prompts where 1 or 2 sentences really gives you the answer. That's always how it is. I think students said, a lot of the students that felt the English portion of the test was harder than the English portion of tests on the practice exams felt that the reading level was a little bit more difficult, and that actually created a time issue for some students. So prediction number 4 for the English part is there's going to be long-winded and complicated passages that may be on a very high reading level. You have to take your time and you have to understand, I really need to work through the vocab questions and the grammar questions quickly. So I do have time to really sit down and analyze the long-winded reading questions. Make sure to use the highlighting tool. When they're asking you to strengthen or weaken a claim, I would highly recommend that you highlight that and really try to focus in on what's important, what's not important. Of course, there's going to be these kind of questions on every SAT, but I think students felt there were more of these, and that was a shock to them. Just like on the math part where there seemed to be more very tricky questions, so there being maybe 2 tricky questions, there was maybe 6 or 5, and that throws off the time management of the student. So prediction number 4, continue to expect this level of difficulty and make sure to manage your time well while you're taking the test. Don't spend more than a few minutes on one question because you need to continue to get to those questions. We all know, anyone that's prepared for the test, the note-taking questions at the end of the English part are very easy if you understand the strategies. So make sure you have enough time to do those properly because you can get all of those right. Every student can get all of those right. If you have any questions about any of these question types, comment down below, let me know. If you want more help, check the link in the description of this video. My digital SAT masterclass course is available online right now. So if you need to prepare for this test quickly, that's probably one of the best ways that you can do that. If you don't have a lot of time to do every single practice test and you don't really know the strategies yet, that's a great way to really learn them very quickly. I also have the book on Amazon that has a strategy for every single question type, so make sure to check that out as well. I'll put a link in the description of this video for that as well. Prediction number 5 is going to relate to some topics that I think are definitely going to come up on the math section that you really need to be aware of. So let's go over those. All right, math topic number 1, you definitely need to know the discriminant. That is going to be important on the test. There's going to be at least one question on that, most likely, if not more than that. That's been another hugely popular topic that they've chosen to include on almost every single digital SAT exam. So make sure you understand that. All right, so number 2 prediction for the math part is there's going to be a function shift question. They've done this a lot. For whatever reason, students really struggle to remember how the shifts tend to work. So make sure to memorize that stuff. Another hugely popular topic and something that we saw in tests 5 and 6 on the Blue Book app was the exponential growth formula. It's another popular one. They love to really change the time element there. So make sure to review those questions and make sure you understand that formula because that formula is definitely going to come up on the test in a tricky, weird way in a certain word problem where it's a little bit hard to determine exactly what you need to do. So make sure you understand that well so you can get that question right. Prediction number 6, guys, is that the test is going to be easier for students taking it during the weekday than on the weekend. We saw a massive disparity. Now there's always a disparity. I posted this video on TikTok and I got absolutely crushed by some lame commenters who are saying, well, there's always a disparity. I get it. There's always a disparity between the weekend test in the weekday test, but this disparity has grown significantly since the digital SAT came out. It used to be more of a 1,000 to 1,100 disparity, where the weekend test average score was in low 1100s and the weekday test average score was around 1,000. Now that's grown, where the weekend test average score was almost a 1,200 and the weekday test score was almost a 900. So yes, there was always a disparity, but I think the disparity is going to continue. Obviously, that's to do with the students that are taking the test. This is a little bit of a high-level SAT concept. If you really want to understand how the SAT works, because of the sample size of students taking the exam, the average score is going to differ. But at the same time, if you are taking it during the week, I think you do have a better shot at a high score. So if your school does give weekday administration of the SAT, I highly recommend that you try to take that. If it's available, you should take it. Obviously, the weekend is fine as well, but I think that trend is going to continue, and that's one of my predictions. All right, guys, my final prediction is not a great one. I apologize for bringing this kind of news to you guys, but I have to be 100% honest, is that we're going to have more of the same. I believe that the May test is going to be very similar feedback-wise from the March test, because I still think that students haven't had the time and resources to really prepare for the test. They have to seek outside help from people like myself and plenty of other great YouTubers out there, and teachers and people doing SAT prep classes. Because there's so little information, so few tests, we usually like to have a student do 10 full SAT exams before they actually go sit for the real exam, and have multiple of those exams be timed practice. Now with only 6 exams, it's better than 4, and 2 of them are good, but the first 3 especially are really poor. So it really leaves students with like 2.5 good tests to do before they take the exam. So you gotta look for outside help, whether it be books on Amazon, YouTube videos. Please try to prepare for the test. And number one, make sure that you prepare yourself for the time management aspect of the test. Time was not supposed to really be a factor on the digital SAT. They said that it wasn't going to be a factor, and a lot of students were saying to me on the internet, students that I met, time was a factor for me when it never was a factor before. So I think that was just, first time the test was given, students didn't realize that was going to be an issue. They weren't maybe prepared with a diagnostic test. So sit down and do any Blue Book test you can, and find a diagnostic testing app. There's tons of them out on the internet. Some are good, some are not. I'll put a link to ours below. If you do want to take additional diagnostic tests and have thousands of questions worth of practice, check that out, and then you can succeed on the test. Students did do really well on the March test, but I feel like students that didn't prepare didn't do as well as they expected, especially compared to their PSAT. But this can be fixed, right? It's very simple. Preparing for standardized tests is a formula. The amount of time you put in, the amount of questions you do, the strategy you use, all goes into how your score ends up in the end. You need to stay calm, you need to stay relaxed, you can't let things bother you, and you can't get wrapped up in the room of students getting stressed because a lot of students were unprepared. So I think as a whole, if you feel more prepared, you block out the distractions and you really focus on yourself, you will do really well on the May test. Of course, if you don't do well on the May test, don't worry about it. There's the June test and the August test on the back of that. There's many after that. If you're in 10th grade, obviously if you're going into 12th grade, there's going to be a few chances left before you have to send in your apps. But at the end of the day, stay positive, understand that this test is beatable. You do need to use strategies. This is not the kind of test where you can just breeze through. You have to know what you're doing. So I'm going to continue to drop these videos. I'm going to start dropping strategy videos because I feel like that's what the community needs. That's what the people want, right? You want to understand how to take the SAT in the best fashion. So comment down below. Let me know what kind of videos, what strategies do you want to know, what question types are you struggling with, and what's your prediction for your own score on the May test. Once again, best of luck, guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.